Thomas woke early that morning, feeling a bit anxious. His thoughts kept flitting between the day's responsibilities and the anticipated return of his wife, Amanda. She had been gone for several weeks on a business trip, and in her absence, the house had felt unusually empty. He wanted everything to be perfect for her return. He made sure the coffee was ready, the living room was tidy, and her favorite blanket was draped carefully over the armchair. When he heard the door open, he looked up to see her standing there, framed by the soft morning light streaming through the hallway windows. She smiled at him, a little weary but warm, and he crossed the room to pull her into his arms. "Welcome home, Amanda," he murmured, feeling the familiar comfort of holding her close. She hugged him tightly, resting her head on his shoulder, her voice soft as she whispered, "It feels good to be back." After a few moments, Amanda stepped back and reached into her bag, pulling out something small and white. She held it out to him, her expression shifting into a soft smile as she said, "I have some news for you." Thomas stared at the small object in her hand, and a moment later, his mind pieced it together. She was pregnant. "Are you serious?" he managed, his voice a mix of surprise and excitement. He reached for her hand, holding it as he tried to take in the news. Amanda nodded, brushing a tear from her eye as she laughed. "Yes, we're going to be parents, Tom. Isn't that worth celebrating?" She gave him a quick kiss, her hand squeezing his as he processed the revelation. Happiness swelled inside him, but a sliver of doubt crept in too. They hadn't been very close in the weeks before her trip. He hesitated, considering whether to mention it, but when he voiced his uncertainty in a quiet tone, Amanda only laughed it off. "Timing can be strange," she said reassuringly. She added that she would schedule an appointment with her doctor to confirm everything. Thomas nodded, feeling a bit reassured but still oddly unsettled. As he grabbed his coat and briefcase, heading off to work, her news weighed heavily on his mind, a hint of doubt lingering in the back of his thoughts despite her calm explanation. At the office, Thomas struggled to focus. The contracts piled up on his desk, and his inbox overflowed with unread emails, but his thoughts were miles away. Memories of Amanda, the story of how they met, replayed in his mind, bringing a comforting distraction from the day's demands. It had been 5 years ago, at a company celebration for his promotion to senior manager. He remembered the pride he felt that night, the crowded room buzzing with laughter and conversation. That was when he saw her across the room, laughing and talking with his colleague, Jason Palmer. Jason was ambitious, driven, and known for his arrogance. Their competitive relationship was well known in the office. They respected each other's talents, but an undercurrent of rivalry simmered between them. That night, Jason's attitude was as bold as ever. He laughed too loudly, holding onto Amanda's arm like she was some sort of prize. Thomas noticed the possessive way Jason leaned in, seeming to lay claim to her. Jason had a way of turning every interaction into a contest, and Thomas wasn't one to back down. Thomas struck up a conversation with Amanda, and soon they were talking and laughing easily, while Jason stood nearby, looking increasingly irritated. Amanda was effortlessly charming, intelligent, and genuine, qualities that drew Thomas to her immediately. As the evening wore on, Jason's arrogance only grew. He bragged openly about his future plans, barely seeming to believe himself, and Thomas watched as Amanda's interest faded. When Jason finally excused himself to speak with some executives, Thomas offered to get Amanda a drink, and she accepted with a relieved smile. From there, everything between them fell naturally into place. They exchanged numbers, and soon enough, a casual coffee date led to dinner dates, late-night conversations, weekends exploring the city, and quiet evenings at Thomas's apartment. Amanda's kindness and thoughtfulness made him feel seen in a way he hadn't before. It wasn't long before he realized he'd found someone he could truly imagine a future with. About a year into their relationship, Thomas was ready to take the next step. One evening, while they were walking along the beach with moonlight casting a gentle glow over the water, he took her hand, looked into her eyes, and asked her to marry him. Her face lit up with joy as she said yes, and that moment became one of the most cherished memories of his life. After the wedding, they bought a small house near the ocean. It was cozy, and they poured their hearts into making it a home, choosing furniture, paint colors, and every little detail together. They spent countless hours on the back porch, watching the waves and sharing their dreams, their worries, and everything in between. Their life was built on a foundation of love and laughter, and though there were occasional disagreements, late nights at work, and the odd rearranged kitchen cabinet, they always found their way back to each other. Thinking of these memories, Thomas felt a swell of gratitude for the life they'd built. Amanda's smile, her laughter, and the warmth of her presence, all of it filled his mind as he considered what it would mean to bring a child into their lives. Yet, despite the joy, that nagging question kept surfacing. Was everything truly as it seemed? Certain details about her pregnancy didn't seem to add up. When Thomas returned home that evening, he was greeted by soft candlelight and the comforting aroma of Amanda's cooking. She had prepared a romantic dinner, complete with wine for him, sparkling water for herself, and a spread of his favorite dishes. They shared stories about their days, and Amanda's happiness was contagious. She looked radiant, her excitement lighting up her face, and Thomas felt himself begin to relax. After dinner, she took his hand with a hinting smile and suggested they head upstairs. When he hesitated, mentioning the pregnancy, she laughed warmly. "I checked with the doctor already," she assured him, "and he said it's safe for us." That night, Thomas tried to set his doubts aside and embrace the news with an open heart. But a couple of days later, Amanda returned from a doctor's appointment with news that hit him hard. "The doctor says I'm about 4 weeks along," she announced, her face beaming with excitement. Thomas quickly did the math, and a sense of unease gripped him. He was certain they hadn't been intimate 4 weeks ago. When he cautiously brought this up, Amanda brushed it off, insisting it had happened and that he had simply forgotten. Her explanation was smooth, almost as if she'd prepared for it. Thomas forced himself to nod along, outwardly agreeing, but inside, his mind was racing with unanswered questions. Thomas had been battling doubts for some time. At first, they were just quiet suspicions, lingering thoughts he tried to ignore. But as the days passed, the doubts started to grow heavier, weighing on him constantly. Then, something happened that made his heart sink. One day, Thomas began feeling a discomfort in his groin. It started as a small irritation, but only worsened. Unsettled, he went to see a doctor. He didn't tell Amanda, hoping it was nothing serious. However, when the test results came back, he was blindsided. He had contracted an STD. The news hit him like a punch to the gut, bringing every suspicion he'd tried to bury back to the surface. Suddenly, those uneasy feelings transformed into something undeniable. He couldn't ignore the possibility that Amanda had been unfaithful. Needing answers, Thomas waited for a moment when Amanda was out. He took a deep breath and sat at her laptop, carefully digging through emails and documents connected to her recent business trip. He knew Amanda was with a different company now, but he hadn't expected what he found. After scrolling through countless emails and scanning documents, he came across an itinerary for her trip. As he scanned the list of participants, he saw a name that stopped him cold: Jason Palmer. Jason had once worked at Thomas's company, leaving over a year ago, and Thomas hadn't thought about him since. But here was Jason's name, listed as part of Amanda's team for a business exhibition. Jason was now not just attending the same event, but working alongside her. Memories surged back. Jason's arrogance, the rivalry between them, and how Jason used to hover around Amanda at office parties. Back then, Amanda's interest had shifted toward Thomas, a fact Jason hadn't taken well. Now, seeing Jason's name beside Amanda's, Thomas felt a sense of dread. Could Jason be using this new connection to get back at him? Or worse, had he rekindled something with Amanda while Thomas was away? The more Thomas thought about it, the more pieces seemed to fall into place. He couldn't prove anything yet, but he was beginning to feel as though he was staring at a picture of betrayal. The thought that Amanda might be secretly involved with Jason haunted him, but even more disturbing was the idea that she might have a larger plan. What if, Thomas wondered, she wanted to have a child with Jason and pass it off as his own? That would secure her financial support, possibly even a large share of his assets. Thomas knew he couldn't sit by passively. If there was any truth to his suspicions, he needed to protect himself. Within days, he met with a lawyer and a financial advisor. He explained everything: Amanda's suspicious behavior, Jason's reappearance, and the unsettling news about the STD. His lawyer, Ellen, didn't hesitate to act, quickly outlining a strategy to shield his finances and assets. Ellen suggested that Thomas establish a trust fund to own his most valuable assets, like his house, retirement fund, and stock portfolio. The trust would hold these assets for the benefit of his heirs or specific family members. Since Thomas would only act as the trustee, not the owner, Amanda wouldn't be able to claim them in a divorce settlement. His financial advisor recommended transferring his savings to offshore accounts in countries with strict privacy laws. By placing his money in international accounts, they could make it harder for Amanda to access his assets in a legal dispute. The advisor also proposed converting a portion of his savings into physical assets like gold and collectibles, which he could store in private vaults. Since these assets wouldn't be tied to his name on paper, they'd be even harder to trace. To further protect his home, Ellen advised Thomas to take out a loan against the house and place the loan funds in a secured account held by her firm. This way, the loan balance would technically lower the house's value, making it less attractive if Amanda tried to claim it. Finally, Ellen recommended that Thomas document everything: his interactions with Amanda, her suspicious behavior, and any evidence he could gather about Jason. If their situation ever went to court, he'd need proof to defend himself. Over the following week, Thomas put these plans into motion, moving his savings, transferring the house to the trust, and securing his assets. He kept his conversations with Amanda casual and light, as if nothing had changed, to avoid raising her suspicions. But Thomas needed more than just financial protection. He needed proof. He hired a private investigator, a discreet and thorough man named David, to monitor Amanda's activities. David worked carefully, aware that Amanda and Jason seemed to be hiding their relationship. They were discreet, never openly romantic or spending too much time together in public. But David managed to capture small moments: a lingering glance, a private lunch, and an evening at a quiet cafe. In the photos and videos, Amanda and Jason leaned close, speaking softly and sharing an unmistakable warmth in their expressions. It wasn't overwhelming evidence, but it was suggestive enough to be useful in court. Thomas felt ready to act. He couldn't wait any longer. With everything in place, he met with Ellen, and together they finalized the divorce papers. Ellen made sure that every detail was addressed, safeguarding his assets as they had planned, ensuring Amanda would receive far less than she might have expected. When the papers were ready, Thomas quietly packed his essentials, leaving behind the life he had built with Amanda. Without a word, he left town and relocated to another part of the country, far enough away that Amanda wouldn't easily reach him. He stayed in a quiet hotel waiting. He knew Amanda would eventually return home to find an empty house. When Amanda came back from her 3-day trip, she entered a silent, empty home. At first, she thought Thomas might be working late or out with friends. But then she saw the envelope on the kitchen counter. Her hand shook as she opened it, finding the divorce papers stamped and signed inside. Nothing else. She stood there, stunned, trying to grasp how everything had fallen apart so suddenly. Amanda tried everything to contact Thomas. She called his number, only to find it disconnected. She searched for him on social media, but his accounts were gone. She reached out to mutual friends, but no one knew where he had gone. As the realization set in, Amanda found herself standing alone, unable to reverse the choices she had made. One night, Thomas vanished, leaving Amanda alone to confront the cold, undeniable reality of their failed marriage. All that remained were the divorce papers, stark reminders of what had been and what was now irreparably broken. While Amanda absorbed this shock, Thomas was sitting alone in a modest hotel room, weighed down by the aftermath of the betrayal he had endured. Memories of trust shattered, of doubts ignored and resentment suppressed, flooded his mind, making the silence around him feel heavy and unyielding. It was clear to him now that he needed an escape, a place free of reminders and filled only with solitude and quiet. After scouring listings, he found a small, secluded cabin tucked away in the woods. It wasn't much, but he didn't need much. Determined to break free from every chain linking him to his old life, he quit his job, feeling unable to face the office again, where the presence of Amanda and her lover Jason haunted him. In this quiet cabin, surrounded by trees and open sky, he hoped to finally unburden himself, to find some measure of peace. As the divorce proceedings commenced, Thomas remained absent from the courtroom, choosing instead to handle matters remotely through his lawyer, Ellen. Meanwhile, Amanda arrived at court with the expectation of having the upper hand. She assumed things would proceed in her favor. However, she was woefully unprepared for what lay ahead. Thomas had meticulously planned everything, safeguarding his assets, trust funds, offshore accounts, and even the reduced value of the family home, out of her reach. Amanda was left with nothing but the divorce papers and a growing sense of frustration. In a last-ditch effort, Amanda tried to use her pregnancy as leverage, hoping it would earn her sympathy. But Thomas was prepared even for this. Ellen presented medical records showing that Thomas had contracted an STD, an irrefutable fact Amanda couldn't contest. To further solidify his case, Ellen displayed photos and videos of Amanda with Jason, making her infidelity undeniable. Within minutes, any advantage Amanda thought she had was gone, leaving her cornered and stripped of options. She entered the courtroom anticipating control, but left with nothing but a sense of loss. With her dreams of an easy victory destroyed, Amanda sought out Jason, desperate for reassurance. Yet, as soon as she arrived, she sensed his anger. Jason didn't hold back his frustration. "You ruined everything," he snarled, glaring at her. "I thought you'd be smart enough to keep quiet about the pregnancy until we'd secured everything. But no, you rushed, and now Thomas has locked us out completely." Amanda felt a chill of dread. She had believed they were in this together, united by love. But now, seeing the cold look on Jason's face, she sensed she had misjudged everything. Jason's expression wasn't one of love or care, but of frustration and anger. "I thought," she stammered, struggling to find the right words. "I thought we were in this together, that we cared about each other." Jason scoffed, rolling his eyes. "We were supposed to take Thomas down," he snapped. "You told him about the baby too soon. We should have checked everything, lined up the paperwork, secured the assets. But now he's moved everything and it's all gone." Shame and fear crept into Amanda's heart. She had been so certain of Jason's feelings, but she now saw that she was just a pawn in his scheme for revenge. As she opened her mouth to speak, he cut her off, his tone icy. "You know what? I don't want anything to do with you anymore. You've ruined everything." Amanda's eyes filled with tears, but she couldn't help but plead. "But the baby—" She hoped for even a flicker of compassion. Jason merely laughed, a bitter sound. "What baby?" he sneered dismissively. "Who knows who you've been with? Don't pin that on me." Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Amanda to stand there, stunned, realizing she had lost everything. Her husband, the life they had built, and even the man she had thought she could rely on. In the 2 years that followed, Amanda gave birth to a baby boy. Her family rallied around her, supporting her when the weight of her choices felt unbearable. Despite their help, however, an emptiness remained. She tried to start over, even ventured into dating, but her attempts faltered each time. Men came and went, and even Jason had vanished from her life completely. Her days felt solitary, her nights plagued by regret and remorse. She spent countless hours thinking of Thomas, wondering where he was and how things might have been if she had chosen differently. Guilt gnawed at her, a constant reminder of the choices that had left her hollow and haunted. Meanwhile, Thomas had found a new life, free from the shadows of his past. He embraced nature, often venturing out for solo camping trips, mountain climbing, and recording his adventures. The videos he posted on his blog quickly garnered a following, and his newfound passion provided both solace and a steady income. He even adopted a dog, a loyal companion he could trust wholeheartedly, a friend who would never betray him. One evening, as Thomas browsed the comments on his latest video, one message caught his attention. A woman had written, "Thomas, I recognized you. I apologize for everything that happened. I was wrong. Please forgive me. I'm sorry for reaching out here. I have no other way to contact you. Just know that I regret it deeply." He didn't need a name to know who it was. Amanda had clearly stumbled upon his blog, either by accident or in an effort to find him. Her words stirred something in him, a mixture of nostalgia and relief. Although the pain she had caused him still lingered, the anger had faded. He had moved on, having found peace in his new life. After a moment of reflection, Thomas typed a brief reply. "I hold no grudge. God will judge us. Live happily." With that, he sent his message and closed his laptop, feeling a profound sense of closure. He had made peace with his past, freeing himself from any bitterness and looking forward to the future with a renewed sense of hope.